We made it just in time, but
That's how I roll, yours, when you travel with me. It's by the seat of your pants.
didn't your passport just turn up today?
But we're going to bring on Sigenergy, the battery.
It's too much for a risk.
So Yorick yesterday was the factory tour.
Yeah, we saw the headquarters and the factory.
Yes, great. And I could sit down and chat with Tony.
Yep, and the assistant manager for the factory as well.
Yeah. Let's get into it and let's talk about the things that we love about this battery, what we don't like about it, the concerns that we've got, and see how it comes at the end and whether we're going to take it on and you can start selling them.
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing itself, let's just talk about the battery. The battery is just only one part of it. So we love about it that it's modular. Explain that part.
So essentially, one of the really cool features about the Sigenergy battery is that you don't have to have an identical battery module if you have a multiple battery stack. So it looks like it will be a case where you can start off with a 5 kilowatt hour battery module, pair it with an 8. There's talk about having a 10 kilowatt hour module soon.
Yep.
And so because of how they basically integrate those batteries, they're not dependent on having essentially a like-for-like setup like a BYD. All of those modules have to be the same type of module. But you have a bit of a concern about the optimiser.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a concern about calling it optimiser. Flashbacks to SolarEdge days. but so what they're doing, and just to get a little bit techie on it, is that they've got the battery in. Like, imagine you're just charging your AA batteries, right? Okay. Or you put them into a torch. If you've got one flat one and one charged one, it's not going to work real well. It's going to drain the charged one, yada yada, whatever it is. So normally that's what you have to have: equal levels or equal batteries. You can't put a D cell battery with a C cell battery or something like that. Where what they've got is this optimizer in there.
Or a DC charge controller, which is what they called it.
Yeah. Well, the marketing department calls it an optimizer. That's silly. So a DC to DC converter, charge controller, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it gets everything to the same voltage level. Doesn't matter what size the battery it is. Doesn't matter how old the battery is. So if you go and put another one in 5 years later, this DC optimizer that's on a central bus system, it's a fairly clever system. Not totally unique, but it's good.
Yeah, it's a little bit different to how the BYDs are set up, which I think is a fair point. So the BYD batteries that we currently sell with the Fronius, the batteries are stacked in series, and so the larger the battery stack, the larger the voltage, which is how it has to pair in with the Fronius. But these are in parallel, and they all share the same common voltage, and it essentially allows for a very high current output.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and that was honestly my concern is, what do you mean you're putting an optimizer in every battery? That sounds terrible. But even the way we saw them manufacturing it, and they've got the battery segment and the optimizer segment, they're separate for heat issues.
Yeah, and the fact that they're monitoring every single cell that they're putting in, they've got multiple testing phases through that whole assembly line. I mean, this is obviously what it would be expected for a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. We both agreed that the fact it's a fully aluminium housing, they've got a fire suppression system built in, which I heard can be a little bit of a joke when it comes to SolarEdge. But no, I think at the end of the day, they took the safety aspect of it incredibly seriously.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting how they dropped the prismatic cells in there, and then they compressed those cells under pressure. Because you don't want them to, how you get battery cells that burst out.
Well, batteries do expand and contract as they charge and discharge, but it was also to make sure there was a constant thermal conductivity into the housing, because the housing itself is the heat sink. But I think getting back to the topic of the common bus bar, one of the great features of having a common bus bar is that you can have a DC to DC EV charger. What a DC connection means when you have a DC charger, and you can basically pull DC out of that car from any brand because it's a direct connection to the battery. And essentially you've got the capability for vehicle to grid, vehicle to house. Now they did a demonstration where they basically had a Nero, which is a Chinese EV manufacturer, that they were able to cut the power to the battery and continue to supply that load and do vehicle to load capabilities and simulate that function.
And there are not a lot of products on the market, and this is just so the whole idea of being modular, you're you're putting your Lego bricks down of the battery, and then one of those can just be a 25 kilowatt EV charger that you throw as your Lego brick.
Yeah, but I think also the comment as well is that, see, the inverter has to be built to Australian standards and be a grid-connected inverter. And so therefore you don't have to rely on the automotive manufacturers to build their onboard inverters to meet Australian connectivity standards. So this is why we, even though, for example, things like the BYDs and the Hyundai Group cars have vehicle to load, they're not vehicle to house because they don't currently meet that standard.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Pretty exciting times. We're still waiting for Australian regulations to change. That's in the works at the moment.
Definitely.
And then we'll have to wait for Energex or the local DNSP.
And there is definitely one big point to make as well, is that while it's currently just Nero that is compatible, they are in talks with multiple major European automotive manufacturers.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's really just a matter of the regulations and a standard being put in place.
Yeah. We did have that question for Tony, and we were pretty happy with that answer. That really, this is just all about standard changes. It's not about technology at all.
Because they can adjust to those standards once those standards are in place.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on to the third brick that we get in this battery system. So instead of doing the inverter, which you do in the Fronius+BYD system that's separate on the wall, we can have an inverter that's completely integrated. So it's just another Lego brick. So you just choose yourself a 5 or a 10 or whatever.
Yeah, and it makes for a very sleek installation.
Yeah, really neat and really quick for the installers, which cuts down on cost. So the inverter, I love that it's just so simple that you just clip it in, and it's you wire one product up. Really nice. I was talking to him because I was a little bit concerned. The guys come from Huawei, basically. All the intelligence comes from Huawei. And I was asking Tony about the difference between, like, would he like to use an optimiser or a global maximum power point tracker, which is kind of like SMA call it shade fix and Fronius has it. And I think it's a really important point. Yeah.
And not every inverter has global maximum power point tracking as well.
Most don't. And some say that they do, and then I test it and they don't. So,
do you have an example of a common inverter that doesn't?
Sungrow doesn't, I believe, unless they've changed in recent years. But any... really, to me, it was SMA that had one. GoodWe didn't, for example. But really, it was SMA and Fronius that had it.
And so what is the benefit of a global maximum power point tracker over a local one?
So just really simply speaking, it's if your panels get shaded, the inverter will get stuck in a bad position. So it basically puts it in four-wheel drive and gets it out of that position. So it helps prevent losses due to shading.
Yeah, and by finding the global maxima, you might get a bit more power out of that array because there is another point in that curve where there's actually more generation capacity.
Exactly, yeah.
Should all inverters then constantly be checking this every couple of minutes? I mean...
Yeah, well, the local maximum power point tracker, if we want to get a little bit more technical about it, it's just scanning that current and voltage curve a little bit here all the time and trying to make sure that it's on the best combination of voltage and current.
But the global is going through that whole sweep.
The global does a 0 to 0, and for that split millisecond, you're producing no power.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that too frequently, then you're losing power. So normally, I think Fronius is at 8 minutes.
Okay.
8 or 10 minutes is fairly standard.
Yeah.
With this one, actually, the installer can adjust it if they wanted to, from 15 minutes down to 5 minutes. I think
that's what they said as well.
So I asked this question of Tony. He just picked up the phone to his tech guy and he asked him the question and came back and said, effectively, it doesn't just do it every 10 or 15 minutes. In fact, it just checks out that you've got one set of panels that's producing at this, the other set of panels is producing at that. If that ratio changes, it goes, oh, well, there might be shade there. Let's give it a sweep and make sure we put it into four-wheel drive and get it out of the shade. It just sounds too good to be true. And so I'm going to get one, obviously, and test all this. Well, let's move on with that. The inverter, probably not too much more to say. Until I test it.
Look, part of the thing of having a solar inverter and battery combination is backup.
Our next point, backup in a blackout.
So one of the common, concerns some of our customers have is the short period of time that Fronius does a fail-safe check. Tesla's really nice. I think it's down to 4 or 5 milliseconds. You kind of see the lights flicker, but barely. Sigenergy is impressive. They talk about a zero latency backup. It's not UPS. They don't have harmonic filtering, which is what you would require for very sensitive electronics, but it's essentially UPS.
Yeah.
Not for medical grade equipment, but it is very close. The other thing it can do too is it can back up a huge amount of power. So their whole headquarters, and I hope it was a true demonstration. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have just had a few buttons and a thing that goes click, but they basically have a button where they can shut down the whole headquarters building, and it goes bang, and suddenly they're running off grid. We were right next to the switchboard when it happened, and it gave me a fright. It was a loud disconnection, but nobody was disturbed. None of the computers crashed. It was a very impressive demonstration.
Yeah.
So not only can do backup for small properties, this is very scalable when you start talking about backing up, say, an office building, or you start talking about backing up a factory where, you've got this critical infrastructure. I've definitely spoken to customers, commercial customers, who want that capability. They have a set backup gateway, a little bit like how Tesla have their backup gateway. Well, depending on the size of the system, if you have a installation that is that large that they don't have a off-the-shelf product, they'll custom make you a backup gateway for that application.
So backup, again, just stepping above where Fronius takes about 30 seconds or whatever it is.
For good reason, though.
For good reason.
Yeah.
Tesla is milliseconds, so you can crash your computer. The Sigenergy, we've just stepped it up again, and you won't even crash your computer.
Yeah, it is basically UPS without harmonic frequency filtering.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, excellent. So the next thing, let's talk about the generator input of it. So I think this is a pretty cool feature. Well, it's probably even more than that, is that it is designed as an off-grid system. So we can just now easily as installing an on-grid system, just whack an off-grid system.
It's capable off-grid as well.
Capable off-grid, and and so one part of that is they've got a generator input, because when you've got a day like we have here in Shanghai at the moment, where you'd be producing no power, you can turn on the generator. Now, you can't just do that with any off-grid system, because imagine your solar system is backfeeding into that generator because it thinks it's a load and you blow up the generator. It can't backfeed. Not completely unique, but just the way it's packaged well together is a pretty cool feature.
It is a very compelling offering. So, Mark, one of the things that you've been showing me a lot on this trip is ChatGPT. How do you feel about AI in Sigenergy?
So obviously I haven't tested it yet, but from all reports, what installers are saying, just on YouTube or whatever. In fact, none of the guys here that came on the trip have installed it either. But from what I hear, the AI in there just makes it so much easier for the installer that if they've got an issue, you just ask the app. So you can ask it, what do I do with this bolt?
What if there's some fault with the installation and we're trying to fault find?
Fault finding, yeah.
It basically the AI finds the fault and tells you this is the step that you've missed, because it's doing a self-scan. But it's not just for installers as well. It's also for the end user as well. Yeah.
So end user, you get a red flashing light on it or something like that, and you go, okay, I've got a red flashing light on the front. You don't have to look up the user manual. You know, what do I do?
Or you can say to your app, what did I produce yesterday at 2:00? And it'll just spit out that number without you having to actually go and look up the graph. As a fleet manager, while we do our best to occasionally go through and check all of our systems, having basically artificial intelligence actively monitoring every system for a fault means that we can provide a much better service to our customers if their system goes down and they're not aware of it.
Yeah, well, you know what I like about it is basically the customer has their own tech support in their pocket. Obviously, we're happy for our customers to call up and we say, turn your inverter off and on again. But, just ask the app that and reset it. And
It is, I think, the first inverter with a proper AI integration. There's a lot of things about Sigenergy that in some ways seem a bit too good to be true, but they seem to be true.
It does seem to be true. Caveat this with we haven't tested it yet, right?
Correct.
I think we were just both blown away with the factory tour.
And the fact that they would take on, genuine feedback as well. One of my requests was to have a button on the charge handle so I could unlock my Tesla. And I've asked a lot of manufacturers this, especially when it comes to EV charging. And most of them go, don't worry about it. Tony, he got his team onto it straight away.
I'll be surprised that if within 12 months they don't have a button on that charger. That's the whole great thing about this sort of startup, fast-moving company, where, other large organizations, maybe Huawei, for example, they're just a lot slower and a lot more conservative. That brings us on, though, to the very obvious cons. I'll start off with one that's not quite as obvious. So the downsides to it. So one thing that, and there's a bunch of, Sparkies standing around the batteries that came on the trip with us. And they have this on the left-hand side of it, they've got all the cable management. And we'll throw some imagery up here. And I was a little bit concerned as an installer myself, who's really concerned about UV rating and
especially in Australia. Yeah.
If you've got that battery on your house for 20 or 30 years. And just this rough cable management work where if you set the battery off the wall, a kid can easily get their hand around there and grab it all. But not only that, just the longevity of these loose cables sitting out to, well, a rat can get in, like not a rat, a possum can get in there.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's one of the weird things we do like about the Fronius is that we can run conduit directly into the base of the inverter, and it's essentially fully sealed from the roof all the way into the inverter itself.
Yeah. So we take that seriously, and our cable management up on the paddles. And actually, I've only just thought about that issue now. It's, they were kind of acting as if it's no big deal and it's going to be fine. The reason that we are so anal about our cable management underneath the panels on the roof is we know that wildlife can get up there and things like that. Now, there was another funny thing, is that on the back of it, the casing had what appeared to be rust spots about it. And all of us were going, what on earth? It's rusting out.
But it can't be rusting, it's aluminium.
Well, that's what we got to the point of. And we asked a few of them, they didn't know. I mean, they weren't tech support, right? The technical people. But yeah, as we got into the floor, it wasn't just that they told us it was cast aluminium. It was obvious that it would be. It's just the rain in Shanghai.
Yeah. There's obviously dirt in the air.
Keeping on with that point, I just think, well, the company has been in business for 2 years. One of the concerns I have about that is just the level of accelerated testing they do. So every inverter manufacturer will do accelerated testing where they run this thing at full capacity for 24 hours a day in a hot temperature and see how long it lasts. Sigenergy did have that testing going on. We'll show that here. And I was asking Tony how long it had been going for, and to be honest, he was like, I think it's a few months or something. He wasn't exactly sure.
I thought it was a year and a half based on other people, what other talks I've had with other people.
But there is a limited amount of testing that you can do when the business has only been around, the product has been out for about a year.
And I think that's a very valid concern. I mean, at the end of the day, until we've had them in the field for 5 years or more, will we see a reliability in line with Fronius, or will we see a reliability in line with Sungrow, or are we going to see a reliability in line with GoodWe?
Yeah.
And look, I'm hoping and I'm expecting to be in line with Fronius, but I think only time will tell.
Yeah, exactly. There is just that risk. And again, going back to the 2-year issue, they've been in business for 2 years, started shipping product about a year ago. That level of it, like, it's just insane that they pulled it off, even if the thing doesn't work. It's insane that they pulled off all the demonstrations in the factory.
That was my one question, big question for Tony was, how did they do it? They have the best of the best working for them. They had people who were head coders for things like TikTok. They had people who used to work at Porsche on the EV department. They had multiple top engineers from Huawei who've obviously moved across.
All their coders is a husband and wife team or something like that. Correct. And they're the champion coders or whatever it was.
Yeah, they both run their separate teams. They have people who've worked at Tesla.
But you still do have to say a business has been around
2 years.
For 2 years. How do we know that they're going to keep on lasting? Imagine this product starts failing because they didn't pick something up in the accelerated testing they've done so far. What's going to happen?
So, Mark, do you think this is an iPhone moment for the solar industry? Or do you think this is another BlackBerry?
We're going to bring them on, I guess. The big concern for me is if I install 100 of these products and they go out of business, that's not going to be very comfortable for me, right?
No.
And I take that kind of, making sure that we're around to look after our warranty seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, Yorick, that's been 4 whole months since we went on that trip. It was a good trip to Shanghai. It was a great trip. What are our thoughts? Are we going to bring on Sigenergy, the battery? Possibly not. It's too much of a risk. Too much of a risk. I totally agree. It's a big gamble, I think. We've been debating this topic, me and you, for 4 months, and in the office, and with a lot of friends in the industry. Let's cover those topics, I guess, really quickly. the biggest concern I've got, or one of the big concerns I've got, is a build quality. That plastic enclosure, it comes with a 2-year warranty, by the way, is just too flimsy. If you can't look after the plastic cover detail, why do I trust you for making quality battery?
That's an support, yeah. And the other thing too, a 2-year warranty on the gateway. I mean,
the gateway as well, the warranty, yeah.
We've compared to the Tesla, it's got a 10-year warranty on the gateway, and that's a critical component of the Sig install system. And if that stops working, your battery stops working.
Yeah, and there are a lot of sneaky little short warranty concerns with the battery as a whole.
Yeah.
So the DC to DC converter optimizer, as they've been calling it too, I still think that, that you get efficiency losses every time you do that. So you've got a less efficient battery to start with. But also, it's just the logic of take as many components out as you can. Why make a complex with more components that can fail, right?
Simple is better. I completely agree on that topic as well.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing too is, look, the company's very young. I mean, it's been in Australia for less than a year. I mean, globally only 2 years. I mean, what are we going to see in terms of, possibly infancy failures? We saw this with both SolarEdge, optimizers again.
Yeah.
They were dropping like flies, and also LG too. I mean, a well-established brand that's just had recall after recall on the batteries. And well, I'd hate for that to happen to Sigenergy.
Yeah. A young company is really concerning. And one thing that I've noticed about that, and this was potentially one of my biggest concerns, was the warranty department. A young company they're really just focused on sales, I think. Absolutely 100% focused on sales. Their warranty, they're outsourcing that in 2 different ways, as I understand it. We'll cover that a little bit more in another video.
Yeah.
All up, I just have not a lot of faith. I think, people come to us because they want a reliable, trusted solution.
Yeah, really want proven technology. But
it's not that.
Yeah, but we want Sigenergy to succeed. And I mean, thank you very much, Sig, for inviting us to Shanghai. It was an incredible trip, and we learned an awful lot.
Yeah. I totally hope, but it'll take probably 5 years till we get egg on our face and we're proven wrong. But I hope we are proven wrong.
Yes, we want to be long this time, but it's just too much of a gamble at this stage. And I cannot, in good faith, recommend Sigenergy right now.
Okay, Yorick, we're going to elaborate on that on another video in a minute. So stay tuned for that one.